Here. Oh, okay.
I see live on
We're on
Facebook.
Facebook. Here we go. Well, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for sitting through all that technical
Yep.
nonsense. So today on our Facebook Live, we've got Kevin Bobo, an alumnus and professor at Indiana University of Percussion. Kevin, could you just tell us a little bit about sort of how you ended up at Wichita State, actually, would be the first question I'm sort of curious about.
Sure. I was born in Winfield, Kansas. So my dad was the piano professor and chaired the music department at Southwestern College
Oh,
when I
really?
was, he did, when I was very young. And we moved to Missouri, and he became the chair of the department at Northwest Missouri State University. Um, and it was an interesting thing because Wichita in that area has really strong string programs, right? And
Mm-hmm.
at that point, playing violin. And when we moved to Missouri, it just really there was just not a lot of string activity going on in the town we were living in. And so for a couple of years, we had to drive and a couple of hours just to take violin lessons, which was pretty. It was not fun for a a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old. My brother was 12 at the time. So eventually, my dad was very heartbroken when he came to the realization that I wanted to play drums. And then my brother just bounced around from instrument to instrument. I think he ended up on electric guitar and tuba.
Excellent.
Was where he ended up. But J.C. Combs, who was my teacher, who is obviously very well known in Wichita, he's from a small town called, an even smaller town called Claremont, Missouri, which is about, probably 30 minutes north of my little town, Maryville. And, growing up, all I'd keep hearing about was this J.C. Combs. My band directors had these bass drum houses that, J.C. Combs made these bass drum houses. Who's J.C. Combs? He's like, he's this teacher that he teaches at Wichita State. And so when I was looking for undergraduate programs, it just seemed to make sense. Here's this guy I've always heard about. I'm familiar with Wichita. Having lived at least close to living in Winfield, basically every weekend we were up in Wichita. So came down, visited the school, and liked what I saw, and the rest is sort of history.
Yeah,
I just ended up using that over a couple other schools.
that's fantastic. And so you did a bachelor's of music performance at WSU?
Yep.
And then from there you went on and did a master's degree,
Yeah.
correct? Where did you do that at?
I went to Ithaca College.
Okay, that's a beautiful part of the country.
It is a beautiful part of the country. It would be more beautiful if you have a job there and can afford to appreciate some
Yes.
of Ithaca, because it's not cheap.
Yeah,
But
this is true.
it was a good place to just focus and work on my craft and get as good as I could in a short period. Master's degrees go by quick.
They do. That's really true. It's always funny. I went on and did a doctorate, and I remember I finished the first year of my master's, and I was working on my doctoral applications. And I was like, this is nuts. I've only been here for a year, and I'm already like looking on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, precisely. It does go by very, very, very quickly.
So one of the purposes of these sort of conversations is to help our students or other people who may be watching this think about, sort of seeing people who have been successful in their field and what we might learn from them. And what I'm wondering, it's a question I asked Stephanie Patterson last week, I wanted to ask you. So if you could go back in time to 18-year-old Kevin and say, hey, do this thing now so that I can be better. What are some things that you sort of wish that you had done differently or more of or less of when you were an undergraduate?
Putting it, I practiced a lot. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I did. When I was an undergraduate student, I was probably averaging close or around 40 hours of individual practice a week.
Wow.
So practicing was never an issue. Um, what I think I would go back and change would be how I went about practicing. My teacher, I think we never really talked about practicing. He just assumed I'm getting all this work done. So, I assumed that he assumed that I was just kind of doing everything that I was supposed to be doing. But over the years, now that I'm 45 and not 18, I know a few more things. And because especially when you have a job and you have to get done in 2 or 3 hours what you normally had all day to do. So I try to really at least address practicing with every student towards the beginning of their degree programs at Indiana University, because I know they all work hard. That's not a question.
Yeah.
But if there's a quicker, more efficient way to get to the end result, obviously that's better. I would have worked on my reading a lot more. I was not a fantastic sight reader, and I really, didn't see the importance of that, because I wanted to play the marimba. I wanted to be a soloist. And it's like, well, you're never going to get up there and sight read anything. You're just going to memorize it, and you're going to go out there and you're going to play it.
Right.
But coming to the realization when I freelanced for a few years that marimba performances are very few and far in between. And you have to know how to do I put marimba in that want category. Like, nobody needs a marimbist, right? You need drummers, you need percussionists. You don't need a marimbist. You just, you want one. And if you happen to have the extra money to pay one, great.
Yeah.
So going out in the real world and being handed, stacks of mallet parts for an orchestra rehearsal, of which, we're going to get one rehearsal and then there's a performance. It's like, well, you got to get better at this reading thing or you're going to drown. Yeah. So I did. Over the years, got better at that. But yeah, there's some real life things that future me would certainly want to go back and tell younger me.
Yeah.
Would have probably told myself to dress a little better too.
I think we all would do that in hindsight, but we were all just, it was the fashion of the day. You can't judge that.
I wouldn't call I wouldn't call my wardrobe the fashion of the day. Basically, yeah, I I had this baseball cap. I'd wear that all the time, and combat boots and things like that. That was my wardrobe: jeans and a t-shirt, pretty much every day of the week.
I think we would call that now is that was your brand. You had a brand, and that's important. Yeah.
Is that what the young
that's what the kids would say. I guess I don't know. I'm a bad judge of character on that. I'm also curious, as a percussionist, so you sort of made your focus the marimba, but at the end of the day, you still had to be a percussionist who had a certain level of expertise on all the instruments. So when you talk about practicing, this we'll talk a little shop just for the percussionists who might be watching, but how did you think about your time practicing on mastering all these different instruments within the family?
Well, first, I don't think I've mastered any of them. I'm being serious.
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody, particularly marimba. It's a hard instrument to play, and I don't think I've mastered it. I don't know of anybody who really has. It's a real tough instrument. It's never right. There's always something wrong, and I suppose you could make that argument about any instrument. But one thing that I went through these pockets of interest, and I think this is important. to become as diverse a musician as possible.
Mm.
And as a percussionist, that's pretty easy to do because we play all these instruments. But if all you do is play the marimba, then, you know, and that's really what you want to, you know, be able to do. If you can really only do one thing, then you know, we always talk about that around here is you better be the best in the world at it.
Yeah.
You know, the likelihood of you making a living at it is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. But, you know, if if you're a percussionist and you feel like, okay, well, I can play, and I'm a really good orchestral percussionist, I'm a good chamber musician, decent soloist, but never learned how to do drum set, never had the time for it, don't really like it. It's like, well, you are missing out on a whole lot of work because people do need drummers. That goes very much in the need category.
Yeah.
So, and even within just drum set or even within a single instrument, just having the knowledge and the skill to play all these different styles of music, that's another thing. It's always funny playing in an orchestra when it's a pops concert, listening to a string section try to swing.
Right.
Some of them can, a lot of them cannot, and they've clearly never studied that kind of music. Well, it's one of those things where, you know, it can come down to, you know, in an audition setting, if it's an orchestra that does play a lot of pops concerts and you're expected to play in them, I mean, it would be tragic if you lost because you never took the time to learn jazz.
Yeah.
I can't tell you, like with military band auditions, I mean, there's a rudimental snare drumming, which the percussion people will know what I'm talking about. There is a rudimental snare drumming component because that is a ceremonial thing that you would have to do on that job. If you were one of those people who went through all of your undergrad and graduate degrees just saying, I don't have time for marching percussion, that's silly, you know, well, you're going to lose that job to the person who took it, you know, probably not even that seriously, but just made sure that they knew how to do it.
Yeah. I think you've highlighted something that a lot of us talk about is sort of this new world of music making is, you know, while there are some that I think feel really passionately and they know I want to be the principal violinist for this symphony and I'm going to just, like you said, I'm going to be the best in the world and that's all I'm going to put my energy towards. Even if when you get to that level, there's only so many spots there anyway. And so this idea of being able to be proficient in a lot of different things, you know, you don't have to necessarily be the best in the world at everything, but to have some proficiency in all these little pockets is really critical.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm also, you know, and I even think with percussion, you know, if you go on that drum set route as part of it, you know, then it's not even just rock and jazz, but it's Latin music, and then all the different versions of Latin music that you know. Do you know the difference between a 3/2 and a 2/3 clave and a son clave and a rumba clave and
so there's, or even just, you know, people who, I mean, I'm not a fan of country western music, you know, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but some of the greatest musicians live in Nashville and that's what they do.
Right. And I think it, you know, that highlights to me the thing that I think about now as an artist. And I think it goes back to, you know, this idea that you never really, when do you master a skill? But I think it's this idea too that you never stop learning as an artist. You know, that, you know, so to expect to be able to do all these different things by the time you graduate with an undergrad degree may not be a reasonable desire, but to know that you, as a musician, as an artist, we're never done learning and growing. I think that's important. I also, you know, this is probably where I would have started this conversation had I been more thoughtful, but I'm also just wondering what led you towards the path of being a professional musician? You know, how did you know that this was the path for you and not a hobbyist musician?
Yeah. I think it came down to, you know, my parents are both musicians. So that that helps.
The family trade.
Yeah. So it was very much forced upon my brother and I at an early age, you know, and
Yeah.
there's no resentment there. I mean, yeah, I would have rather played drums to start, but you know, he gave us violin, whatever, you know. But my dad would practice with my brother and I every single night for about 30 minutes each. Now that I am a father, that kind of patience, that's an amazing thing that he did for us. And so we of course resented it at the time. We
Right.
we both hated it. We were like, maybe he'll forget tonight, and he never did.
Right.
But I can't deny that foundation was very crucial in my development, and for my brother too, who isn't even a musician, but he's a psychiatrist at the Mayo Clinic, so he turned out okay too.
All right. Yeah.
So honestly, I don't know anything else. I don't know how to do anything else.
Yeah.
Thankfully, this thing that, you know, is the only thing I know how to do is something I do enjoy, right?
Yeah.
But I just don't know how to do anything else. So I'm very thankful that I love teaching and I love performing, and I would say I love them equally. And even composition, I also compose. I would put put that in the same level of passion. I thoroughly enjoy composing music too. So and I still love learning. And when you're around really great students and really great musicians, you're just constantly learning. And yeah, I can't picture myself doing anything else. There's nothing else that I really want to do. I do have other interests and I do have hobbies, but I think that hobbies are different, because if you all of a sudden had to do your hobby for your job, you may not like it as much.
Right.
So yeah, some of the things that I do for hobbies, I wouldn't want to do those as a job.
Right. But I also think, you know, it's important for those of us, and I think in these creative fields, is to have hobbies that provide some relief from those things. But yeah, but the idea of doing it for a living, I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I talk to my students, and I say it somewhat facetiously, but with also a grain of real honesty, that if there's anything else in the world that you can see yourself doing that's not music, that you feel passionately about, think about that. Because if you don't have a true passion for this, if you can't imagine yourself, if you can imagine yourself doing something else,
Yeah.
then maybe that's the pathway, because it's a hard life. And so I think you speak to this idea that's really important of just sort of like, I can't do anything else. This is what it is for me. So
Yeah.
I think that's critical. I'm also curious, just going back a little bit to your time when you were a traditional student, not a lifelong learner, but a traditional student. Other than your applied instructor, J.C. Combs, and your teacher Ithaca, do you have any other teachers or other learning experiences that really stuck with you and made you the artist you are now?
Oh, definitely. J.C. Combs was great about bringing in guest artists. He would bring in about 14 a year, and that's no joke.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So by the time that I graduated, I had, gotten to know close to 60, or maybe close to 60, these artists that were out in the field, and of varying degrees of accomplishment too. Some were, just the absolute tops of their field. Some were, young up and coming artists. But I made sure to try and take a lesson, or at least play for every single one of them, and just get some kind of feedback, even if they didn't play the marimba.
Yeah.
just to get their take. And I think one thing that was really great about just the environment at Wichita State is I learned a lot from just the other faculty. And that, I remember my sophomore year, I was really dealing with performance anxiety in a pretty bad way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was becoming very frustrating. And I remember, at the time, David Perry was one of the violin professors. And he just agreed to meet with me and just talk to me about it.
Yeah.
I remember playing for, Dr. Van Boer was our music history professor at the time. And I just asked him, can you come in and listen to me play some stuff and just give me some feedback, which, Frances Shelley was the flute professor she probably isn't anymore, but
Fran retired about 4 years ago.
Okay, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But
and actually lives in
was
Bloomington
great.
now. She actually,
what?
yeah, I believe that's correct. I think she retired and moved to Bloomington. She's your neighbor.
Oh, wow. Well, I'd go say hello if we weren't social distancing. But all this is over, I will.
But yeah, so now you know. Yeah, that's what I've heard. I will double check to make sure. But yeah, I believe she's in Bloomington.
Okay, well, that's neat. Well, anyway, she helped me. I'm sure they still have the NAFSCR competition, right?
Yeah.
I did that a couple of years. And she helped. She met with me and coached me on some Bach pieces, and it was great. We had a lot of fun. So that, I mean, and then of course, Dr. Mays and Dr. Roush, our composition faculty. That was I never got a chance to study composition at Wichita State. I didn't really have, but they were both my theory and work teachers. So, and they were obviously so.
I think one of the things in there that I think is really important that I talk to our students a lot about, or I try to, is the idea too that as much as you can learn from other practitioners of your instrument, you can learn a lot from other instrumentalists or other musicians. I always say I learned more about phrasing from a master class I went to by an oboist than I ever did from any string bass player I studied with. And it was just this, it's this way of thinking, the way other instruments think and how you can transfer that over to what you do. Especially as a marimbist, to think about how playing Bach is just, it's a different experience on marimba than if you're playing it on harpsichord or.
Of course.
So I think that's a really important idea. I guess I'm just looking at my questions. So we're going to enter I like to do a little speed round at the end. So these are just some quick questions that don't need a lot of narrative, but just, quick 1-word, 2-word pithy answers. Thinking about the repertoire that you get to play, what's one of your favorite pieces?
Oh, you even sent me that in advance. I have a lot of them, and I have a lot of them for a multitude of reasons. I guess one of the ones that I was playing recently was when I first learned. I also first learned it at Wichita State. Was Eric Ewazen's Northern Lights. I love that piece. John Serry's Rhapsody for marimba. Whenever I get the courage to try and get it out again and learn it. Again, also did that first learned that at Wichita State, though it took several years after that to really get it right.
Yeah.
And there's a handful of I guess, my own pieces that I still really love playing. There's a new piece that I was supposed to premiere about a month ago that I wrote for my wife's and my 20th anniversary.
Oh, nice.
Of course, that gig got canceled, so the premiere of that has been put off. But that is a very fun, very challenging piece called Lost Dances. Okay. So right now, that's kind of one of my favorite things to play, just because it's so new to me, and I never got to. Nobody's heard it except my wife and a handful of students. But so
okay. Is there any repertoire that you haven't had a chance to play yet, but you And when I say play, you haven't even learned it yet. But is there any repertoire that's not on your list yet that you're excited about adding to your list?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind learning one of the. There's a couple of Alejandro Viñal pieces that I wouldn't mind learning one of those. I don't want to learn both of them.
Okay.
They're pretty similar to one another, but I wouldn't want to learn both of them. But and there's a lot of repertoire that from judging competitions that I've heard that, yeah, I think are quite outstanding. And I wish I had the time to really dive into them and invest the time. I do a lot of, not a lot, but I've done a fair amount of multi-track recording where I'll take a percussion ensemble piece and play all the parts on it.
Yeah.
I would love to do that with Third Construction by John Case, because I think it's really, really cool to do that. I think that, but I need a whole lot of instruments, and I need to be able to go to my office. But that is something that I would really like to do. I've done a few and put up a couple videos of the multi-track recording stuff. It's very challenging, but it's very rewarding once it's done.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know the percussionists are going to want to know, what grip do you find yourself using most often on marimba? Are you a Stevens or a Burton guy?
Stevens. Exclusively Stevens.
Oh, okay. I'll have to tell you my Evelyn Glennie story sometime.
Okay.
It's pretty funny. Okay, well, and then the last, I think maybe the most important question is, what's for dinner tonight?
Oh, my house?
Yeah.
Let's see. It was my daughter's birthday yesterday, and she wanted egg rolls. So we made about 60 egg rolls, and we thought, surely that will last us through the next day. They're all gone.
Awesome.
They didn't make it. So I don't know. We'll probably make some tacos and something like that. But
excellent. All right. So many people are eating at home now. So this is the thing. As I'm trying to think of what we're cooking at home, I'm trying to learn from other people. What are you guys making? We'll try that. So, I think
it was kind of funny though, like in the rush of, you're trying to get into the grocery store, you're trying to be safe, you're trying to get what you need and get out.
Yeah.
I love to buy like stuff from local farmers, and so there's this farmer that makes this sausage, and it's amazing. It's so good, right?
Yeah.
But on the packages he sells it's a very plain label, and so I didn't read it, and I thought I was bringing home like 5 pounds of this really amazing breakfast sausage, and it was ground turkey.
Oh, curses.
And Emily's helping me put it in the freezer, and she's like, "Why'd you buy turkey?" I'm like, I didn't buy turkey. She says, "You bought turkey. You bought a lot of turkey."
All right. Turkey tacos it is.
So we made meatballs, and they were good.
All right, well, there you go. Awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for this time. I hope everyone got a lot out of it. I know I did.
Good.
Keep staying safe, and next time you're in Wichita, we'll go have lunch or something.
Absolutely.